Hello everyone. Today's topic of the video is going to be about negativity bias. Do you ever notice that little negative voice you have in your head, the one that just pops up and ruins what should have been an enjoyable or at least peaceful moment? Sometimes we might wonder, why is this negative part of us so persistent? And truthfully, it is understandable. In today's environment, we experience negativity from the news, the media, politics, future predictions about what the world's going to be like. A lot of things are seeming to be negative. I mean, go read any comment section under a social media post and you'll see some of the most negative stuff ever. And the point here is that the negative things tend to get our attention more than the positive things. But the question that remains is, why does this happen? Personally, I share lots of personal things on these videos and my blog. I try and do both positive and negative. I think that the duality of experience is a beautiful thing, and both sides should be addressed, the ups, the downs, positives, negatives. I think it's all very important. And unfortunately, I wasn't always this person. There was a little rough patch in my life where I was much more focused on the negative, whether it was getting in dumbass arguments on social media comments about irrelevant things with potentially not even real people, watching negative things like politics, negatively critiquing myself and other people. This was the norm for, I don't know, maybe a couple years of my life. But the point is that it wasn't a very enjoyable existence, you know. I wasn't getting lots of positive interactions, experiencing positivity in general, and it sucked. So I wanted to stop, but at a certain point it just became a unconscious and automatic process that just, had a life of its own. But luckily, one day I came across the concept of negativity bias, and this concept helped me become much more mindful, much more aware of where I was placing my energy, what I was focusing on. And now I'm not wasting time getting frustrated over negative headlines or negatively critiquing myself or others when it's not necessary, right? So it's helped me remain much more mindful and appreciate the goodness and positives of things rather than just focusing on the negatives. Now, it is important that I say here, I'm not arguing for you to completely ignore all negatives and just positivity. I think it's extremely important to address both. Going too far to extreme of any side, right, is never good for us. And today in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the topic of negativity bias, why it can negatively affect us, and how we can avoid those negative effects. So to start with, defining negativity bias, I'd like to paint a picture for you. Just imagine for a second you were like one of our ancient ancestor humans that lived in a small tribe. The amount of life-threatening danger that you experience on a daily basis could be immense, right? We have enemy tribes trying to kill us, predators trying to kill us, the climate, weather is trying to kill us, everything is trying to kill us. And this is most likely why we have a tendency to have a negativity bias, because if we were in that type of situation, focusing on how beautiful the day is or how much we love our significant other isn't really going to benefit us, right? Because we could literally die if we don't focus on the negatives. Negativity bias is literally defined as a cognitive bias that even when positive or neutral things of equal intensity occur, things of a more negative nature have a greater effect on one's psychological state and processes than neutral or positive things. So this bias towards the negative is what helps us originally survive, and it's been continuously passed down, right? Because the people who engage in this type of thought process survive, they pass their genes, and it just continues. So at this point, it really is just ourselves versus our biological hardwiring here. One person we could look to blame would be the media. Today we don't live in imminent danger like we used to. We have lots of things controlled for that we used to not be able to. But we still do have this bias. Instead of vicious predators, we're up against companies profiting off of our fears and our brain's tendency to avoid suffering or loss. These companies know exactly what I'm talking about. This isn't just a brand new idea. They have the top psychologists in there like, okay, what gets us the most clicks? And it tends to be the negativity. So according to news outlets, the world is ending 24/7. Everyone hates each other. We're all divided. And then you take a step outside and you're like, okay, it's actually pretty chill out here. It's not as bad as they're trying to make it think. So really, we don't need to get too deep into that. Lots of companies just want to profit off the negativity. I can't really blame them. The next thing that we want to talk about is the avoidance of loss, which I also consider the avoidance of life. So our brain does have this negativity bias, and it has a tendency to avoid suffering or loss. This is very important because it can greatly diminish the scope of your life if left unchecked. It can continue shrinking your life, stopping you from pursuing opportunities until all you're left with is anxiety and regret. Oftentimes, our brains simulate things before we go through them. So, imagine you saw an attractive person, right? And you imagine ahead of time you want to talk to them, so you're gonna imagine it. You're like, okay, I'm gonna go talk to them. I'm gonna say this. They're gonna smile. We're gonna laugh. Blah blah blah. I'm gonna get their number, and it's good. On the other hand, if you weren't a positive person who thought that way, if you were more of a negative focused person, you might see the situation as, oh, I talk to them, I say something stupid, or somebody laughs at me. So because you have that negative visualization, you're not going to do it at all or approach anybody because you're trying to avoid the loss of esteem or dignity and the negative interaction that could happen if you take this action. I think, for example, I've never lost a game of hockey in my life, but I've also never played a game of hockey in my life. So, do you see the point that I'm getting at there? The next thing we want to talk about is the psychological impact of the negativity bias. So, negativity biases have actually been linked to numerous psychological disorders such as depression and anxiety. Even if you were somehow still able to be a tolerable person to be around, on the outside, on the inside, you're going to be most likely messed up if you're continuously focusing on the negative. Negativity and stress are interchangeable, right? If we're constantly focusing on what negative things could happen, we're technically simulating stress on ourselves. If we're constantly stressed out, we're going to have the buildup of cortisol. Over time, that's just going to lead to negative mental health effects and even body effects. So the trickle down effects from that are just going to, of course, bleed into everything else in your life, relationships, work. We don't want that. And now that we're talking about relationships and work, negativity bias can absolutely ruin these things, even if they're good. Because you could have much more emphasis on the negatives over the positives, and you're going to therefore see the negatives more than the positives, even if the positives outnumber the negatives, just because that's how this bias works. So, your relationship could be completely undermined by your negativity bias if you fixate on just one negative aspect of it and you can't let it go, even though there's plenty of good other aspects of it, right? And same thing with a work opportunity or your job. It could be an absolutely great day, and then your boss has one negative comment, even though for the last month it's been all good things, and then one negative comment, and then you're just, oh, I hate this job, this sucks, and it just ruins your whole day. So, I don't know about you, but I don't want to work with someone or be in a relationship with someone who has this negativity bias. And the world is just a better place with more positive people in it, right? Of course, there's negatives. They're real. We're not going to pretend they're not. But why focus on them unless we absolutely need to? So I know I just covered a lot of negative information there. Don't worry about it though. The good news is most people aren't going to be at the extremes of those things. That's just where it can get to if left unchecked. But now we're going to get into discussing the strategies for how you can overcome the negativity bias and also how you can overcome or just completely avoid altogether the negative effects. So to start with, we have cognitive behavioral therapy, which is often referred to as CBT for short. And cognitive behavioral therapy is a structured, goal-oriented type of talk therapy. So essentially the goal of CBT is we want to get to our thoughts, our behaviors, our feelings, and how they all interplay. If we can fix the thoughts, we can fix the behavior, or vice versa. If we can fix the behavior, we can fix the thoughts. Some really important concepts regarding CBT and negativity bias would include cognitive distortions, and pretty much these are just the way that our brain interprets the world, and our brain thinks it's right, but it's just completely wrong. It's not actually reflecting reality, but to the brain it is absolutely real, so it acts like it is. Two big distortions that come into play in this situation are filtering, which is where we only focus on the negative aspects of something, and the second one is catastrophizing, which is anticipating the worst possible outcome. The next important thing with CBT is cognitive reframing, and this is a super simple technique for countering the two distortions that I just mentioned. You just pretty much recognize your thought process might be wrong. It might be right, but it could be wrong. You acknowledge that, and then you just ask some simple questions. So, for example, if You text somebody and they don't text you back for 6 hours, right? You don't really know them, but you like them, and you're maybe worrying, like, oh no, they're not texting me back. Some questions you would want to ask yourself are, is it really that bad? And the answer to that is no, because we have lives and it's really just a minor inconvenience. Another question is, are there any positives that I can find? Obviously, in this situation, if you're not texting somebody, you have more time to focus on whatever it is that you need to be doing, right? And then at the end of the day, another question to ask yourself is, what's another reasonable way of interpreting this, which is probably the most important part of this? Instead of assuming the person didn't text me back so they hate me, they don't want to talk to me, or they don't like me, just assume, oh, they're a busy person too, they have a life, they'll get back to me when they can, and then we move on. We end the thought process right there. It's honestly, it's going to take some time and practice, but once you get cognitive reframing down, it really is a truly liberating thing. And now moving on to the next thing for dealing with negativity bias, and that is mindfulness. So now that we understand the CBT perspective, we're going to be able to utilize it. But it requires the cognitive part to use the entire thing. So this requires being mindful, so that way you can correct your behavior in the moment rather than realizing what you should have done later. So here's a few methods of practicing mindfulness. The first one is meditation. Super simple, just find a technique that works for you, do your best to be consistent. And the point of this is it's going to create space between you and your thoughts and emotions. There is an app called Headspace. I think they have a free trial. You can go try that out. That'll give you guided meditations. There's also YouTube, plenty of guided meditations on there for free. All kinds of things. It could be for emotions, negativity, letting go, anything you want. Get on YouTube and practice some meditation right now if you can. The next thing is letting go of judgments. And this is really important just because of how thoughts work. So if you can accept the fact that you have a problem with negativity and you don't judge yourself, it's going to make it a lot easier to get past this, because if you don't, you'll notice the negative thoughts, and rather than thinking about, oh, okay, here's the negative thoughts, what are like the questions I just asked, like how can I think of this differently, what's another answer, blah blah blah, you might think, why am I so negative? Like, damn, I wish I could just get over this. And then you get stuck in that loop. And really, that answer isn't solvable, because you can't just wish yourself out of negativity. It's not going to just happen overnight, right? So you have to just not judge yourself, let it go, and be like, yep, I'm being negative. What's another way I can fix this? And over time, you learn to we just don't want to overemphasize the negative. We just want to accept it. Just question the thought. Don't question yourself. Just question the thought. That's the most important thing. And the final point I'd like to get to is we want to do a positivity rebuild. So maybe you've been overemphasizing the negatives for a while. Maybe you're kind of an asshole. It's okay. It's no problem. You can slowly start replacing the negative aspects of yourself with positives, and it can seem overwhelming depending on where you're at. But if you take it really slow and try out some of these suggestions, I think you'll see some progress. So one thing we want to start with is positive habits. The same way the negativity became a habit is the same way the positivity can become the habit, thanks to neuroplasticity. And some things that we can start doing to make these changes are gratitude, so journaling or just telling someone that you're grateful for them. Great ways to do it. Another way is affirmation. So for example, you could say, I'm intelligent, I'm working on myself, etc. And the next thing would be positive self-talk. So I'm proud of myself for working on my negativity bias. The next thing for positivity would be to seek connections. It's pretty simple. Just seek positive connections with other people. Positivity together amplifies each other. There you go. And the final part would be to set realistic goals for yourself. So we're going to start making progress and prove that little negative voice that it's wrong. If we can continuously start showing progress and growth through achievable goals, we're able to provide our brain with the data that it needs to say, oh, okay, life's better than I thought, and it's a progressive thing. So in conclusion, today I talked to you about the negativity bias. I gave you what it is, and I gave you some practical advice for how to start working on it. If you truly implement the cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, the mindfulness, and also the positive rework to your life, you can definitely start seeing some progress. Just always try to keep in mind negativity bias. If you're finding yourself in the negativity, the mindfulness really is the most important thing. If you change nothing at all, just simply recognizing, oh, I might be being a little negativity here, maybe I can chill out, that's super important, and that'll be just a huge positive impact on your life alone. I hope you found this information to be useful, and I appreciate you popping in today. If you haven't yet, be sure to check out my Pinterest, the blog. I post other content on there, so if you like to read or if you like images, I make some pretty cool ones over on my blog and Pinterest. Thanks again for checking me out, and I'll talk to y'all in the next video.